What's up, metalheads? Welcome back to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I'm feeling industrious.
Industrious. Look at you dressed up in your nines. Shit, they can tell that I'm lying now. Oh my God. I didn't think about that. But Chris has a top hat on, as you can clearly see, right?
Clearly.
Everybody can agree on that. Chris, does this feeling of industry have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
You know, it just might have something to do with my heavy metal street cred, because you see, I've recently been playing this game that I discovered called Anno 1800, and it's a city builder game, and as the name implies, it takes place in the 1800s, Industrial Revolution. You know, you find your islands, you start off with farmers, and you take them through, you know, advancing technologies. Eventually you have electricity and all this and that, but you can name your islands, you can name your ships, and I decided to look to metal and my favorite styles of music and favorite songs and favorite albums to name all my ships. So I've got some warships named like the Man of War, which isn't, you know, that kind of makes sense.
That makes sense.
I've got the Mighty Raven Dark, because I thought that would be a really cool name for a warship. But then my flagship, you know, the United States named so many of their ships after former presidents. I named my flagship the Hanneman, after Jeff Hanneman of Slayer.
I like that.
And on top of being able to name your islands, being able to name your ships, you can also name the character that you're playing as. So I've been, you know, a man of industry while using the name Edvard von Halen.
And then I'll make my own character to come and rival you, Edvard von Hagar. I'll make it work. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out the pronunciation at some point. That sounds awesome, though. It reminds me a little bit of the discussion of Brutal Legends.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, I think this is a lot less slaying BDSM-themed demons and a lot more building copper mines to then smelt them so that you can make glasses for your engineers.
Okay. It's nothing like Brutal Legends. It
is very much for someone who enjoys logistics of like, hey, this island has a copper mine and this island has the zinc mine, but I need to smelt both of them together to make brass. So I need to set up my trade route that will automatically bring the copper to the island with the zinc, because that's where my engineers are anyway. And it's a lot of that. It's a lot of
riveting.
Like, navigating menus and stuff like that. But I'm having a lot of fun with it by just naming everything after heavy metal bands.
All right, and that's what matters, as long as you're having fun with it. All right, well, I feel like we should address this. At the very top of the episode, we made mention of people being able to tell how Chris is dressed now. That's because welcome to episode 50. Holy shit.
Holy crap.
In celebration of episode 50, we bring you Scrap Metal TV. You can now see us while you listen to us. And I just wanted to make it clear for any of our podcast listeners, any of our podcast audience, this is not going to change the flow or the layout of what the podcasts are like. It's going to be the same exact content. As Chris reassured me, we're going to be the same two morons that we were before we had video, now that we have video. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. That's something that is really exciting to me, something that I'm super proud of. Chris, I mean, here we are 50 episodes later. How do you feel?
I can't believe we made it to 50 episodes.
Yeah.
This is
we were consistent.
Yes, like this is awesome that we've made it this far. And you know, I'm someone who spends a lot of time watching YouTube, watching videos and watching video podcasts at times. Right. It's great to finally feel like, you know what, the time is right. Let's dive in. Let's let the people see how beautiful we are when we're talking about the music we love, you know?
I've been growing this shit for 2 years. I got to show it off. But getting back to your exploration of the what is it, 940 anuses, the name of the game, something like that. I love the fact that it's bringing something from the past back to the future and giving that industrious kind of feel and somewhat steampunky. It sounds kind of like it, but you are bringing these elements from the past to our current day. And I love the fact that in heavy metal there has been a resurgence and an homage to the classic genre of thrash. And that's what we're talking about today. We are talking about bands who are bringing us modern thrash, not just in the riffs, but in the way that their albums are produced, in the way that everything is mixed, the tones that they're using, the sounds that we're getting through the speakers. I love the fact that thrash is coming back in such a big way. Chris, are you excited to talk about modern thrash metal?
I am so excited to talk about modern thrash metal. I have, on this podcast, at this point, 50 different times, I have talked about my love of early 80s thrash and that sound of the reverb, of that raw quality, of that raw sound that you got when thrash and speed metal were being invented. So taking this opportunity to explore modern bands that are just like me, love this style of music and are trying to,
absolutely,
write their own songs in that style. This is a subject I'm really excited about. This is an episode I had a lot of fun researching. And I found a lot of really great music, so I'm really excited to discuss all these bands that I discovered, bands that I've been listening to. This is going to be a fun one.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I agree with you in that these episodes are always a lot of fun. Similarly to when we did our old time rock and roll episode, to be able to go through and find bands who are paying homage to a style of music that we both love and that you can clearly hear the influence and the love for the genre that these bands have as well. And to see that they're doing it in the right way. A lot of them are also peppering in their own more modern influences. So you do have like their own take on thrash a lot of times as well, but the bands that really stand out to me are those ones that you can kind of go, oh my God, I can totally hear this coming out in like 1983. I can totally imagine someone handing me this tape at a concert and being like, you've got to check these guys out. And that's what I love. I just love that they've been able to take the genre and the songwriting to the next level. And in diving into this, I feel like we have to give our audience an outline for what thrash is, the elements that make a thrash band a thrash band, and a thrash recording a thrash recording. So, Chris, we're going to have a thrash counter on this episode. Can you explain to me what you feel are some of the tent poles of what makes a thrash song or a thrash album a thrash album?
I think it's some of the qualities I already mentioned. In the early 80s, you had a lot of reverb, and that's a sound that I've always loved. I think something that has always attracted me to thrash and speed metal is that it borrows a lot from punk rock, particularly the fast tempos and the kind of straight ahead 4 on the floor. It may be at 250 beats per minute, but every song is written in more or less 4/4. If you want to get a little experimental, it's 6/8, but it's still very much like faster punk rock. And instead of singing about, the government or corruption, you're singing about either hell or the nukes going off.
Yeah.
So I think those are a lot of the things that I love about thrash, and I think that's a lot of things that so many people love about thrash. It's things that you see these modern bands continue to sing about in thrash. Definitely borrowing some of those political sentiments, as some of the bands I'll talk about get very political even nowadays.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the 80s, being political was more about the Cold War. Now it's same but different.
Yeah. Time's a flat circle. Why are we talking about the same shit again?
But I think that's some of the qualities that I love about thrash, and some of the qualities that you expect to find in thrash is, in particular, those themes of either hell or politics and the fast tempos. And I think It's more surprising when you hear like clean vocals. It's usually someone yelling.
Yeah, for sure.
It's usually someone yelling because they're pissed off, because they're in hell, or it's the Cold War.
Yeah, like you don't normally get a lot of the harsh vocals in thrash. It's more of the in your face. And when I mean harsh, like you're not getting a lot of death metal growls in thrash.
No.
And you're getting with some of these bands that we're going to discuss, they're touching that. They're kind of towing the line, or they're walking the fence of almost sounding like death metal vocalists, and kind of, I guess maybe that's where the term blackened thrash comes in. I know you love that one so much. But yeah, I love that we are sticking with that Tom Araya style. You're just yelling and you're just projecting as much as you possibly can. And I love that sound. I love everything being awash in reverb. I love the fact that the drums all have more of a room sound to them. You've got more space around them. Modern drums are recorded as such that they feel right there. They feel very present. They feel very in your face. The kick drums are super, super clicky, with that deep thump underneath, where you're going to get some of that, and you got some of that back in the day, but not quite as much as what we have now. Back then, the bass drums had a little bit of that click for the attack at the top, but it was more so the warmth and the body that you were getting out of the bass drum. Even the guitar tones sounded a little bit more raw. They were definitely distorted. This isn't like our guitar duos conversation where we were talking about a lot of guitar tones not sounding quite as distorted as you think. But they had this warmer, analog sort of sound to them. And a lot of it came from, I think, engineers trying to figure out how to mix for this style of music. Because before this, you had straight ahead hard rock. You had straight ahead heavier music. It's not like they'd never dealt with this before, but this was the first time that they had a style that was this aggressive. Yeah. And they're trying to figure out how to mix it and how to master it. I remember my friend Mike was talking about how he wishes that they would remaster Souls of Black because it sounds so low. Like it sounds just, it's not mastered to be as loud as the rest of Testament's albums. And I was thinking about that, like, why is that? And were they just trying to leave themselves a little bit more headroom because the sound was that much more aggressive and they didn't want anything to clip? They didn't want to drive the recording too much and have a distorted recording like Death Magnetic. So it's really interesting to see and like start diving into why they sounded that way. And I mean, I love all of the elements that make a thrash song. Like you're talking about the gallop riffs. You'd have like the pit riffs as well. You got a lot of that with Anthrax. You get a lot of that with some of the other bands as well. And we've talked about it before, but the fact that thrash had a knack for coming out with these instructional songs. It's like you were doing the twist, but you're just beating the shit out of everyone in the pit. I love that because it like solidified what it meant to be in the thrash scene and what it meant to be a thrash band. And like now when you hear the Toxic Waltz, you know what the song is about. You know what you're supposed to be doing during this song.
They get up on your feet. Yeah. Don't be so obsolete and thrash like an athlete.
What is it? The twist and mashed potato? No exception to the rule. But I love stuff like that. The harmonized guitar leads. All of these elements help to make up this style of music that we love so much and that in turn these bands wanted to bring back.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we're saying, when you talk about the pit riffs, I think that's where you really see the crossover between punk and thrash, or even like what led to hardcore is that it was almost like breakdowns before breakdowns were a thing, and it was, at the time you just called it like halftime because you were playing at half the tempo, and eventually you're like, well, no, now you can kind of look at that as the beat down riff, the pit riff, the breakdown riff. It's interesting to see how that's where it came from, and it's interesting to see these bands take that and emulate that and continue to evolve it. Basically taking something that we've heard before, someone else took it to create a new genre of music, and now these guys are like, well, no, we're just going to do what they did in the same style, except now it's 30 years later and we can sound even more aggressive and more distorted than they did, because now we have 30 years of thrash metal to look at and see what worked, what didn't, and now we're going to sound as fucking thrashy as possible.
Yeah.
And we're going to sound the way, you know, these bands sound live now, because you see these bands live, and we talked about it in, I think we touched on it a little bit in the guitar duos, where when you see a band live now, maybe 30, 40 years ago, they couldn't get as distorted. Now they can. So live, they sound distorted. Now you have these bands that know how to get that sound and are creating that sound. Now we know that that's what the songs were always meant to sound like.
Right.
So
it's
now
like
these
they're
bands
standing
get to
on
do
the research that these other bands have already done.
Yes.
Right? They don't have to go through the trials of like, well, what'll it sound like if I scoop all my mids? What'll it sound like if we put a pillowcase and a, you know, like a 10-pound weight in the bass drum?
Yeah.
It's already been done. So they're just kind of, I don't want to say copying, but they don't have to fight to create the music. They're not creating the style. They're not inventing it. They're emulating it.
Yes.
And they're paying tribute to it. And like one thing that I actually didn't do a whole ton of digging into were a lot of the punk bands that did inspire a lot of the earlier thrash bands. Because you know, you hear the talk about a lot of the British new wave, or the new wave of British heavy metal kind of influencing Metallica and Exodus and, you know, the early thrash bands. But you don't talk about like all the punk bands that these guys were listening to as well, because I mean, how many times do you see pictures of Hetfield with a Misfits shirt on? How many times do you see these guys that were clearly listening to punk as well, because thrash didn't exist yet? They were in the process of making that style of music. So it was born from that faster tempo, that aggression that you had with punk, and, you know, that borderline hardcore as they were kind of getting there. So it's really interesting to see how, like, we're talking about bands who are paying tribute to this style that's so close to everyone's heart, but the bands that were creating it weren't listening to it. They were taking elements out of punk and the new wave of British heavy metal and morphing it into what would become thrash. So let's talk about some of these early thrash bands. Who were the early thrash bands that these bands are emulating now? And you have to start, we joked in the Guitar Duos episode that it's like, all right, we just have to sprinkle their name in there and then we can move on. But you cannot talk about thrash and bands influencing modern thrash bands without talking about early Metallica. And those first 2 or 3 albums were such a huge influence.
Absolutely. You know, Metallica comes out with an album like Kill 'Em All, and yes, you had a band like Venom kind of sort of doing what may eventually be known as thrash or speed metal, but when Metallica comes out with Kill 'Em All, that's the first speed metal album. That's the first thrash metal album. That's the birth of this genre. And I'll talk a lot of shit about Metallica since 1986. A lot of people will talk shit about Metallica since 1986.
Yeah.
But you cannot deny the effect and the influence they had on fucking everyone. Because I think what happens is, as at least from my perspective and my experience, as you try to find heavier and heavier and heavier music, you find your way to Metallica. And it might be it might be Enter Sandman, and it might have been I Disappear, Saint Anger, whatever it was. That was where you started, and finally someone pointed you in the direction. No, listen to Master of Puppets, listen to Ride the Lightning, listen to Kill 'Em All. And then you can see, okay, as much as I loved this music that they made throughout the 90s, throughout the early 2000s, that early 80s metal is where it all started.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it all started. Regardless of where Metallica went, regardless of what Metallica sounds like now, they invented this style of music. And you're going to have a hard time finding people who aren't at least a little bit influenced by Metallica. Yeah. And you're also going to have a hard time not being compared to Metallica every time you play thrash metal. Because if anytime anyone hears a metal song, they think it's Metallica.
Yeah. Yeah, people who are outside the genre, just that's the name that they know. That's what they've attached to the style of music. So it's anything that's heavy. You know, AC/DC will be on. They're like, is this Metallica? Is this their early stuff? Was this with the original guy?
Yeah.
Not Mustaine. Not Mustaine. For all of our people tuning in now on video, you will now know if this is your first time visiting the Scrap Metal podcast. We have certain opinions about Dave Mustaine. And all I have to say about them right now is, watch him become the god. But right alongside Metallica in the early days was Exodus and Slayer and Overkill and Testament, you know, Anthrax and even Venom. So like a band like Exodus back in the day, obviously they share some DNA. Some would even say they're bonded by blood with Metallica. And I mean, Exodus was just as important. You know, we were just talking about like the Toxic Waltz and
yep.
They have so many classic songs from Bonded by Blood, from Beautiful Disaster, that helped to create the blueprint for thrash. Chris, I know you're a huge Exodus fan.
Yeah, absolutely. You've heard me gush about Gary Holt multiple times on this show, and my love of Exodus and all of the music and all of the great thrash metal music that has come from them. And yeah, you're right, Bonded by Blood. I mean, I'm going to talk about the band Bonded by Blood, who named themselves after an Exodus album, you know. Yeah. That kind of shows you the effect that the band has and the long-lasting effect they have. You know, Bonded by Blood, I don't know if that was specifically 83. I mean, I know Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax, I believe, all released an album in 83, which kind of started thrash metal. I don't remember when Bonded by Blood came out, but you figure it's at least 20 years later. These guys who were maybe had just been born when Bonded by Blood comes out, and they're naming their album after that album. You know, I think that shows the lasting effect that thrash metal can have and shows the influence it can have in these bands that want to emulate that sound and fill the need for more bands to have that sound, because not all those bands from the early 80s lasted. You know, not all those bands from the early 80s. We're talking about Metallica. Metallica wrote some great thrash metal in 83 and 84, and since then they have written less and less thrash metal songs on every album, to the point on 72 Seasons there's one thrash metal song in Lux Eterna, and the rest is Metallica-ish. And I think it's those two things. It's the filling the need, wanting there to be more thrash metal in the world, and also wanting to emulate those bands that whoever it was introduced you to them, whether you were there in the 80s, you know, or a kid in the 80s listening to them, or whether you had an older sibling who introduced you to them, or a parent who introduced you to them, wanting to emulate that sound and being like, this is the greatest style of music ever. I want to play this style of music.
Right. How much of an influence do you think a band like Venom had on early thrash and helping to kind of create also somewhat of the blueprint of what these more modern bands would emulate?
And I think Venom is huge in not just the sound, but also the themes. You know, they're a band that almost exclusively sings about hell and demons and things like that. And I think a band like Slayer, who's one of my all-time favorite bands, you know, they toured with Venom. I think Metallica even toured or opened for Venom. And you have Venom playing this faster style of music, but the joke has always been that they're not very good at their instruments. So they're playing this style
that's where Lars gets it from.
you
I had to.
You can't resist. I don't blame you. But yeah, Venom is a band that you listen to a song like black metal, and it's a thrash metal song. It's a speed metal song. It's about a band playing in hell. And you're not surprised that someone heard that and was like, okay, I can play that, but I can play that better because I'm also capable enough to play in the style of an Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. Right. And it's similar, not to get too far off topic, but similar in the way how AFI looked at what the Misfits did and were like, okay, they had a former guitar player playing the drums for them, and it's like someone who's never seen a bass before playing bass or whatever. Like, we can play better than them. Jade is a much better guitar player than Doyle Wolfgang von Frankenstein will ever be. So even though they are so influenced and inspired by the Misfits, AFI can write in that style but take it to the next level. And that's what bands like Slayer and Metallica were doing. They heard Venom. They heard what they were doing. They're like, these guys are playing fast. These guys are playing this style of music that's aggressive and about all sorts of, demons and hell. They're wearing the studs and the spikes and everything. We're going to take that. We're going to take it to the next level because not only can we play it fast like a punk rock band, we can also play the types of leads that Iron Maiden is playing. And you're kind of clashing punk rock and new wave of British heavy metal and whatever the fuck Venom was doing, mashing it all together and calling it thrash metal.
It's like Julia Childs putting together a thrash metal stew. It's delectable. It's just so scrumptious. We throw a little bit of Venom and some Exodus and Testament in there, and just so good. A scrap metal first, my Julia Childs impression. Now, the band that kind of sent me on this trip of like, holy shit, modern thrash is coming back in a big way, and it's really, really good, was the band Traitor. Now, I found them through, there is a TikTok and a YouTube channel, I believe it's called Producing Like a Pro. I forget the guy's name, but he's a British sound engineer. And, he's produced millions and millions of records, and he had his friend on there, and he was like, today we're going to be talking about thrash metal. That's right, thrash metal. Because he doesn't really talk about heavy metal on his channel a lot. It's more so about mixing and how you get the certain sounds right and compression and EQ and all these things. Yeah. And he had his friend on there who had done a documentary called Total Thrash. And he was like, he had worked on the recording for the song, which was Sodom, Angel Ripper, and this band Traitor. And they recorded this song called Total Thrash in the style of an early thrash recording. So I was like, that's really awesome. This song sounds so good. I wonder if their other stuff is just as good, or if it was just kind of like a fluke, or they just got really lucky to be paired up with, Sodom and Angel Ripper. And I was so happily surprised and just excited when I listened to their first album, because it straight up sounds like The New Order. It sounds like it came out during the heyday of thrash, and it's so good. They get the vocals down right. They get the gang vocals. You get the production, and like we've said it time and time and time again, the sound of that reverb and that room sound is so important to thrash, because it gave it more of this like live feel. It feels like when you listen to those albums, you can almost picture listening to it in an arena because of that reverb that's pumped in there. And these guys nail it just spot on. They are so good. So good, in fact, that as soon as I found them, I sent Chris a text and was like, you have to listen to these guys. These guys are so good. You're going to fucking love them. They play so fast. What did you think of Traitor when you finally checked them out?
Yeah, I checked them out, and the first song I did listen to was Total Thrash because I saw Angel Ripper is in there, so I got to check that one out. And yeah, that was a great song. I listened to that whole album, Exiled to the Surface, which, you know, the title track was great. My favorite song is their cover of Careless Whisper. That was awesome.
I just listened to that a few days ago.
But you talk about, I believe, their first album, Thrash Command, in 2012. You know, I was listening to the song Spiritual Warfare, and it sounded like if Slayer and Sodom like had a baby. That's what this song sounded like. Like it sounded like Seasons in the Abyss era Slayer. And then like that was the intro and like part of like the middle of the song, and then the rest of it sounded like straight up Sodom, which I mean, I believe Trader is from Germany, so there's no surprise there that they're that influenced by one of the biggest German thrash metal bands. But yeah, listening to them, it's like you said, they fucking nailed it. You know, they knew what they were going for, and they nailed it. They played that early style of thrash, and it was just modern enough that you're like, oh, they're not purposely sounding like shit, but you understood what they were going for, and yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, they to bring back up their German roots again, they have a song called Teutonic Storm.
Yes.
So when I saw that, now knowing what Teutonic Metal is, see previous episodes if you don't get that reference. Which please do. I mean, fucking come on.
Yeah.
But like I was so excited to see that they had a song besides their cover of Careless Whisper. I thought that was really fun. They do a cover of Blitzkrieg Bop, I believe. And off of their first album, the song Merciless Hate was one of my favorites. I like when you hear it, it feels genuine. It feels, you know, that they got the sound spot on, and that's just part of the equation. They also got the songwriting down.
Yes.
Where it's written in that style. You know, it's really easy to say like, oh, we're a metal band. Oh, we're a thrash metal band. Oh, we're a new metal band, whatever. But taking up the title does not mean that you're writing songs in the style of. And that's what's super important. You have to be writing the songs in the style that you're trying to emulate, or everyone's going to see through it. And now I'm not going to say that they won't listen to you, but now you've made a claim that you can't hold up. Right? You've called yourself a thrash metal band, and you're not using any of those songwriting elements to pay homage to the genre. And that's what's so important. That's why these bands stood out to us. Another band that I mean, we talked about it recently on our Best Back Ends episode. But another band that surprised me so much, and I was so mad that I'm so late to the game on them, is Power Trip. Power Trip is so good. Executioner's Tax is a great song. Again, another band where they were like touching on hardcore, like early hardcore.
Yeah.
But they have that thrash sound, and they have the reverb, and they have the fucking vocals down right. I'm so mad that I found them so late. Did you know Power Trip before? Like it was like 2 months ago. I text Chris again. This happens a lot. I text Chris and I'm like, this band is fucking awesome. You got to listen to them.
So here's how I judge how long I've been listening to a band or have known of a band, when I order my Spotify based on recently added. Okay. And I, at some point, listened to Power Trip a while ago, and at some point, you know, I liked it. I remember liking Executioner's Tax. I just feel like I never went back to revisit it for whatever reason. It might have been I discovered Hexen at the same time, and that was the end of that. But yeah, I went back and was listening to more of Power Trip, and yeah, Executioner's Tax is a great song. Firing Squad was a song off of that same album, Nightmare Logic, that I really liked. If Not Us, Then Who was another song that I really enjoyed. So they're a band that I knew of, or that I forgot that I knew of, and then I went back and listened to it and saw the song titles. It's like, oh yeah, I remember listening to this.
Yeah, I love that when you're like, oh, wait a minute, I do know these guys.
Yeah.
The song Crossbreaker, I brought that up on our Best Back Ends episode as well. That's a great fucking song. Condition of Death is great too. It's like I should have had all the songs like listed album by album on my screen so I can see it, but of course I fucking forgot. Again, if you're just joining us, we do research, but just enough.
Speak for yourself. I have, pages and pages and pages of notes over here.
Meanwhile, I've scribbled all my notes across my body like fucking memento.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, for actually being organized. Another band that you actually introduced me to was the band Gamma Bomb. When did we first bring them up? What episode was that?
I don't remember. It could have been. I remember talking a lot about the song I Will Haunt You, and I don't remember why. That might have been like...
That was the hate songs.
Hate songs or songs to rot to. Songs to rot to. I Will Haunt You is where I talked about... Gamma Bomb and that album Untouchable Glory. Gamma Bomb is actually a band that I discovered. I went to go see an Overkill show, and I've talked about it. It was supposed to be at the Crazy Donkey. They moved it to another venue at the last minute. No one knew if we were even in the right place. Bobby Blitz comes out. He's even like, I don't know if we're in the right spot, but we're all here, so let's just play some fucking metal. And
it turned out being the fucking lobby that Christopher Walken danced in that one music video.
You mean Fatboy Slim?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. But yeah, so Gamma Bomb was one of the 12 bands that played at this show. The band comes out and they're playing. All of a sudden, the lead singer jumps out wearing a green satin baseball jacket and has really long, straight, bright red hair and just starts yelling and yelling the lyrics to this song. And I'm like, these guys are fucking awesome. This is the coolest fucking thing ever.
That's a fucking introduction, all right.
Yeah. And so since then, I've been a fan of Gamma Bomb. And, I don't know how much I've listened to the albums that were out at that time. I've listened to a lot of the music they've released since then, like Untouchable Glory from 2015. I love their albums.
That's a great album. Great song.
Speed Between the Lines in 2018 is good with their song 6616. And then there's also the song Kurt Russell, which is about just hanging out with Kurt Russell. And then
I didn't know. That's great.
That's a fun one.
That's a dream of mine.
Yeah.
Just hanging out with Kurt Russell.
Yeah. And then a few years ago, they came out with Sea Savage in 2020. And, the title track to that is really good. Miami Super Cops is a good song off of there. Ready, Steady, Goat is a fun one. So yeah, Gamma Bomb is they're considered more of crossover thrash, which leans into the punk influence more than your regular vanilla thrash. And
vanilla thrash. Stop. Collaborate and listen.
Well, he did re-record that as a new metal song.
That's right.
So
yeah. Him
there
and
is
Kid
that.
Rock we're on the same fucking wavelength.
But yeah, Gamma Bomb is, and they've been lumped in with Municipal Waste as quote unquote pizza thrash, which is thrown around as a derogatory term, the same way I guess hair metal is thrown around.
Yeah.
Gamma Bomb doesn't get quite the hate that Municipal Waste does. For whatever reason, people fucking hate having fun.
Yeah.
Apparently, you're not allowed to have fun, so
Just
they hate
yourself.
Municipal Waste. Yeah.
You're allowed to smile on stage nowadays. It's okay, I promise you.
But yeah, it's cool to see that crossover thrash as well, because like I've said, I'm a as much as I love my long songs and my 12-minute long versions of Meatloaf songs and 8-minute long Iron Maiden songs, I also love thrash metal songs that in 90 seconds you got 3 verses and 2 guitar solos, and I love that as well, and that's why I love a band like Gamma Bomb, and like I said, even Municipal Waste, the way they're thrown in as pizza thrash. But I mean, Art of Partying is a fucking awesome album,
Yes.
and it's I don't like how much hate they get, and it's like online you'd say that you like Municipal Waste and people think you're a fucking loser, and I'm like, and then you have those people that come in and they're like, okay, I guess you just don't like having fun, go be a fucking loser somewhere else, then I'm gonna listen to fucking Attention Deficit Destroyer and Lunch Hall Food Brawl, which is I'm just going to have fun with it because that's what we're all here to do. We're all here to enjoy ourselves.
Yeah. And it's like, to think that the thrash bands back in the day were not having fucking fun. Look at we've talked about it before, any of Exodus's lyrics, all the fucking clever ass puns in their writing. Even like Metallica and Anthrax. Anthrax are a bunch of fucking goofballs.
Yeah.
Like,
but I mean, Anthrax gets hate as well, so.
Yeah, I guess so. Municipal Waste is one of those bands that I wish that I had done a deeper dive into earlier on. Like, I've gone back and I listened to a few more songs from them for this episode, and I still don't feel like I have a total grasp on them. But I like them. I like what they're doing. It is similar to Gamma Bomb, and it's fun. There is nowhere does it say that you cannot have fun if you're a metalhead.
Yeah.
I don't like, one of our rituals at fucking concerts is we run in a circle. Like fucking schoolyard children. Like how stupid is it to say like, oh, if you're writing a song about the art of partying, that's not metal enough. Fuck you. Come on. You got to have fun with it. You have to have fun with it. And yeah, Municipal Waste is one of the bands that I'm making a vow now to to invest more time into, because they are really, really great. Another band that I discovered actually through YouTube, which this is really cool. A few weeks ago, I was like exploring YouTube, and I just, for some reason, this is such a niche thing, but I was like, I wonder if there are any like first person live mix videos on YouTube, like dude at a soundboard during a concert fucking mixing shit with a fucking GoPro. And there was like 6 videos on there.
I'm surprised that you're surprised that existed. Like,
I know, right? I mean, if you can find videos on YouTube where it's like what it's like to be 6 foot tall and walking through the grocery store, which I have watched those videos as well. Then I shouldn't have been surprised, right? But Chris Hamill Audio is a YouTube channel that I found, and this guy does a lot of POV content, of POV soundboard content, where he is showing you what it's like to mix live. He works at Dingbats in New Jersey, and he's their sound tech. And so it's so cool. Like, he explains his whole process. He's gained such a huge following. And he did this one video where it was like, here's 4 thrash bands or like 4 metal bands that we had this night. And it's really cool. He puts up their name, like when their set comes up, and he has markers timestamped for all the bands. And it was such an interesting thing. And the band Night Demon, it stood out to me so much. And they have kind of like that Venom sound. It's just, they're a power trio, and they have that old school sound. Maybe not so much the production. Their production does sound very raw, but it doesn't have all the reverb, which again, neither did Slayer in a lot of the later albums.
No, later on, I mean, I think Rick Rubin's a big part of that, because
he's everything he fucking produces is just like, make it sound like you're in a cardboard box. No fucking echo, no fucking reverb. Let's make it sound as raw as fucking possible.
Because the first 2 albums, Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits, have the reverb and have that sound to it. Then Rain and Blood comes out in 86, produced by Rick Rubin, and sounds amazing and really showcases, like, it's, talk about crossover thrash. There are songs on that album that are 90 seconds long, and that's definitely some of the shortest music Slayer's ever written or recorded, and really showed their punk influence. But I have to say that's Rick Rubin, who was like, fuck all this reverb, we're not doing that sounds like shit.
It might have also just been he felt like they didn't need that to, like, he wanted them to stand out more. So it's don't have them washed in reverb, strip it down and make it as if you're actually in the room with them, as opposed to watching them in an arena, right? Make it feel like you're sitting right there in the middle of their practice space, which is really cool. And Night Demon does a great job of emulating a lot of that type of sound. And they were just, I love YouTube for the rabbit holes that you can go down.
Definitely.
And finding bands like this, they're not the first band that I found just randomly through exploring YouTube. And I love that. We've talked so many on so many different episodes about exploring and finding new music through different avenues, be it TikTok, be it YouTube, be it a record store, be it you see a friend's tape when you go over to hang out or whatever. And I just love that YouTube is another avenue where that's possible. You know, it's no longer tape trading. It's now you find a band that you like on Apple Music, you scroll down to the you may also like, and go through each one of those bands, and it's great.
How do you think I found every fucking band I'm going to talk about today?
Chris is just pretending he's listened to any of these bands. He's just going through Metallica's you may also like section at the bottom of their page.
Unfortunately, that's all bands I already like because it's Slayer, Testament, Exodus, Overkill, Anthrax, and Megadeth.
Yeah, let's be fair.
So
off of Night Demon's first album, Night Demon, the song Night Demon is really, really great. The Chalice is really fun too. And Ancient Evil. I know that's just the first 3 songs, but start with those and move forward from there. That's how I did it. And that's been our mission statement from day one, right? Is finding new music, going outside of your comfort zone, not just listening to the same 6 albums, but also celebrating those same 6 albums that you really, really love. But I love episodes like this because it almost forces us to find more stuff that we're going to enjoy. Yeah. And in turn, bring you beautiful people more things that you're going to enjoy. Chris, tell us a little bit about Hexen.
So Hexen is a band that I discovered a few years ago on a nonstop search for new thrash metal to listen to. And I found the band Hexen and their album State of Insurgency. They're a band out of Los Angeles. This album came out in 2008, and unfortunately, they only came out with 2 albums. This album, and I forget the name of the other album. Being in Nothingness is the other album. Came out in 2012. But State of Insurgency is an album that I know I have gushed about on this podcast. I know I've talked about the fact that I bought the cassette when they remastered the album. I have the t-shirt. I've talked about the song Mutiny and Betrayal. I've talked about the instrumental Desolate Horizons, but some other songs off of this. The opening track, Blast Radius, is great. Gas Chamber is a phenomenal song. It's from the perspective of a guy who murdered a bunch of people and doesn't feel bad about it and is laughing as he's killed in the gas chamber. It's awesome. Also, the song Past Life is great. You know, Hexen is just really good modern thrash metal. Yeah. And it's just, they hit everything. They've got the aggression, they've got the violence, they've got the speed. And they also include in the outro and as well as the instrumental Desolate Horizons, they also include something I forgot that is super important to thrash metal, and I'll talk about it some more as well. Acoustic and clean guitar. That is just as important as the distortion and the fast tempos and all of that, and Hexen has it, and these guys are phenomenal. I fucking love these guys. I will not stop telling people to listen to State of Insurgency. It's such a good fucking album. And like I said, I was at a point where I was listening to the same fans may also like on Metallica. I was listening to Overkill and Exodus and Slayer and Anthrax, and I'm like, I need more, and I found Hexen, and since then, I've found more of the bands that we've talked about and that I will talk about, but every once in a while I come back to Hexen. I'm like, no, I need to hear that fucking album again because it's just so good. It's so fast-paced. It's so aggressive, and it's just it's all the things I look for in thrash metal.
Yeah. And State of Insurgency we definitely have spoken about on the podcast. I'm pretty sure this one we did talk about in our album artwork episode because the cover art is all done by the same artist who did a lot of Megadeth's album covers, right?
That I don't know.
Oh, okay. Then it's in the real similar style.
Maybe, yeah. I mean,
So yeah, even the cover art they're emulating.
It's instead of it being a nuke going off like you usually see on these 80s album covers, it's a guy blowing up a bus. Very much a reference to Speed. The Keanu Reeves classic. Between the artwork and the music, you can tell that they just wanted to write more of the 80s thrash metal that they love.
Right. Which is exactly it. It's like, hey, listen, we really love these 5 albums. I wish that there was a 6th. Oh, wait, we can do that. We can write it. One band that I had found on YouTube and kind of had a similar look, in regards to their album covers as those classic, like Peace Sells and Rust in Peace sort of album covers.
Yep.
I know we don't normally give Megadeth a lot of credit on this show. But
don't worry, I'll be sure to make fun of Dave Mustaine later to counteract.
Okay, thank you. We've got to even it out. Was the band Terror Activator. And again, another YouTube find. I found them through the channel The New Wave of Old School Thrash Metal. And is that what we're calling it? Is it not just called Modern Thrash?
I guess we need to make more convoluted genre names.
I mean, see also our genre smorgasbord episode.
Yeah, like I think if you're gonna invent a new style, you just can't say, "Oh, we're modern thrash." No, we're the new wave of old music, but it's new now.
The razzle dazzle on the old classic you love, and. I don't know. I read it and I was like, doesn't modern thrash just roll off the tongue a little bit more? I mean, it's a cool name because it's obviously paying homage to, the new wave of British heavy metal. And
it also helps you sound more elitist saying it that way.
Yeah.
And that's what's most important, John. You need to be
more elite you can sound.
Yeah, you need to be able to gatekeep the genre. And the only way you can do that is by calling it New Wave of Old School Thrash or whatever the fuck.
If you don't call it that, then you're not gatekeeping, you're not gaslighting, and you're not girl bossing, and that's what all heavy metal is about. But the band Terror Activator and their EP Moshing is Available. So fucking funny. Like the album covers this dude who looks like one of the what are their names? The Hanson brothers from Slapstick?
Yes.
Like he's got like the backwards cap on, blonde hair, and he's holding a sign that says Moshing is Available, and he just looks like he's been had the shit beat out of him. It's great. And I played the EP and I was like, holy shit, this is really fucking good. And it's like, it's really fast. It's very aggressive. It has a really raw production style. So it just definitely another band that is super, super worth checking out. And on that same page, I found also the band Suicide Watch and their album Thrashing Like It's 1986. Both the EP and the song Thrashing Like It's 1986 are phenomenal. Great examples of exactly what we're talking about. And I just love that there's like this little community. Okay, maybe not the elitist portion of it, but this community that's coming together to champion all of these bands. Chris, what are some of the other bands that you've found that you really love that you think exemplify this? Are we going to call it new wave of old school? No, modern thrash.
It's modern thrash. It's modern thrash. I've talked a bit about crossover thrash, how much I love pizza thrash in bands like Municipal Waste and Gamma Bomb, a band who, in my opinion, sounds like if Municipal Waste took themselves seriously, is the band Toxic Holocaust, which I didn't realize Toxic Holocaust started off as a one-man project by the awesomely named Joel Grind. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to start a thrash metal band. And you know what? I'm going to be the only member of this thrash metal band. And he played fucking everything on the albums. I believe by the time he got to an album that really introduced me to the band, an Overdose of Death. I think he brought in like another drummer and another guitar player. But yeah, this album came out in 2008. It's got some great songs on it like Wild Dogs, Nuke the Cross, The Lord of the Wasteland, and
Nuke the Cross.
Nuke
so
the
good.
Cross. Yeah.
That's so fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome,
That's
dude.
fucking great. Nuke the Cross.
But yeah, it's like I said, it is very much the short songs and the speed you get out of Municipal Waste, but it is more aggressive and not about partying. So I guess people like it since it's not about having fun, you know? So
Right,
people are allowed to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one of the bands that
Crossing my arms like a cool guy because
Exactly.
you're not allowed to have fun. Christ.
this is definitely a band that I discovered while on my journey looking for more and more thrash metal band. I found this band. I remember telling my brother about it because we both enjoy the art of partying. And I was like, you know, Toxic Holocaust is Municipal Waste, but serious. And he knew exactly what I was talking about.
And that goes to show you too, is like being able to identify things like that about a band. It's like, oh yeah, that's if Municipal Waste just took themselves a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
It just means that they've built their brand well enough to the point that you can make jokes about it.
Yeah.
Now, you brought up Bonded by Blood earlier, and just like I saw it in the notes, and I immediately called out the tribute there.
Yeah, I remember it was announced that they were going to tour with Exodus while Exodus was celebrating the album Bonded by Blood, like an anniversary, and people were like, this is fucking weird that a band called Bonded by Blood is supporting Exodus on their tour to celebrate the anniversary of their album Bonded by Blood. But I actually saw Bonded by Blood at the same show I saw Gamma Bomb and Overkill. I think Forbidden was at that show. Evil might have been at that show. I forget who else was there. Like I said, there was like 10 or 12 bands. But yeah, I saw Bonded by Blood, and that was my introduction to Bonded by Blood. And similar to Gamma Bomb, I'm assuming because the stage was so fucking small, the lead singer would kind of chill off to the side until he actually needed to be out on stage to sing. And so he kind of did a similar thing where when it was time for the vocals to kick in, he just jumped up on stage and started singing. And that was my introduction to the band. But yeah, it's their first album, Feed the Beast, that came out in 2008. It has the song Immortal Life, which is a really good song. Feed the Beast is a really good song. A phenomenal song off of this album is the theme from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that was really cool to listen to as well.
Okay, hold on. Are we talking animated, or are we talking like from the movie that?
No, the animated Heroes in a Half Shell Turtle Power.
Okay.
You know, that's the theme song that they play. But yeah, Bonded by Blood is like I said, this album Feed the Beast came out in 2008, and you know that came out in 2008. Hex and State of Insurgency came out in 2008. Overdose of Death came out in 2008. Municipal Waste Art of Partying came out in 2007. This was definitely the time when everyone was like, hey, you know what? Let's start writing thrash metal again. And I'm so glad everyone decided to start writing thrash metal again because we've got all these great bands and songs that we can listen to now.
It's funny because I feel like there is this idea that the resurgence of thrash as a style is a new thing, as if it was just within the last 2 or 3 years that this started happening again. And I think maybe within the last, 2 or 3 years, it's become easier to market this. It's become easier to get your music out there. It's easier to release your own music now than, it's easier now than ever before.
Yeah.
So there are so many different facets and so many different avenues that you can release your own music on. It's gonna seem like, oh, all of a sudden everybody wants to be fucking thrash metal. Everyone's starting to write thrash metal again. And this idea of it like being trendy. Do you think it's trendy to sound retro? Do you think it's trendy to write, modern thrash metal when these bands were all doing it for some reason in 2008?
I don't know if it's trendy, but at the same time, I think you can't deny the impact Master of Puppets and Stranger Things had.
Okay. Yeah.
And Master of Puppets and Stranger Things isn't going to influence these bands. Because they've been listening to Master of Puppets.
Yeah.
We didn't have to watch Stranger Things to be introduced to Master of Puppets. We already knew and loved the song and the album. But with the greater public being introduced to Master of Puppets, people who their only exposure to Metallica is Enter Sandman now hear Master of Puppets.
Yeah.
Does that introduce that style to music to new people? And does that make it easier or more acceptable or more accessible to be a thrash metal band? Because now the biggest thrash metal band in the history of thrash metal has a popular song that's actually a fucking thrash metal song.
Yeah.
You know, they're not just known for their,
exactly.
radio-friendly heavy metal. People finally know a thrash metal song. And are some of these bands also taking advantage of that and being like, well, hey, thrash is... People are seeing that thrash is actually really fucking good.
Yeah.
And, some of these bands, a band like Hexen, they put out 2 albums, 2008, 2012, and that's it. They reunited recently the lead singer and one other member reunited with members of another band to perform State of Insurgency in its entirety at 1 or 2 shows. And that's it. I almost think of them as this century's Nuclear Assault. They came out, wrote some really good thrash metal, and then went about and did something else. And never revisited it, never wrote new music, never came back.
Never had the opportunity to become just a mediocre heavy metal band.
Yeah.
By overstaying their welcome.
They came in, they wrote the greatest thrash metal music they could, and left. And that was it. And if that album comes out now, do they have more staying power? Who knows? It's an interesting thing to talk about because I think you look at some of the bands that we talked about that influence this style, how much Metallica has changed. Slayer's retired. Megadeth is Megadeth.
Yeah.
But you have guys like Overkill that have not stopped.
Yeah.
They have written nothing but thrash metal for 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Testament also, who's coming back and writing some of the best stuff of their careers. Exodus too. Yeah.
And so you have some bands that didn't last and you have some bands that did last. Even a band like Gwar went through their thrash metal phase in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, you can't deny the impact that Metallica in Stranger Things had. And so that might be part of it because there's plenty of bands. I forget which bands it was, but there was 3 or 4 different bands I looked at that have released new thrash metal albums in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
I'm listening to one of the bands, Terrifier, is a band that I found. Again, I'm comparing them to Municipal Waste, but they write longer songs. At times, they actually reminded me of Testament, but they came out with an album, May of 2023. As of this recording, they released that album 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it sounds like I said, I'm comparing them to Testament, a band that's been around for so long, playing that style of thrash metal, but the music is coming out now.
Yeah.
And is that a result of metal or thrash metal maybe being more in pop culture, in the public view, public conscience, whatever it is?
Right.
People are kind of keeping an eye out for thrash metal now. Maybe, possibly.
People who were not aware of it in the past, suddenly it's something in pop culture. Suddenly it's in their favorite Netflix show.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm being somewhat facetious in asking if it's trendy to be retro because metal has always strived not to be trendy. But your response brings up another topic that I want to touch on.
Yes.
And that's what I'm dubbing the Eddie Munson problem. And you brought it up right there. Now, do I think this is a real problem? No, I don't actually think it's a problem that people are introduced to metal and introduced to metalheads through Eddie Munson. I feel like the problem is metal elitists' reactions to a character like Eddie Munson. because 12, 13-year-old me was watching The Crow, and I was like, I'm fucking goth now. This is it. Like, this is what I'm gonna be. You know, I watched Donnie Darko and The Crow, and suddenly my personality was shaped. I was insufferable and liked to dress in black. And for a lot of young kids now, Eddie Munson could be that gateway. Eddie Munson could be that person that they want to emulate. And yeah, you got cringy TikToks of kids fucking doing the weird anime fucking shit. But you know, if you've seen them, you know what I mean. But I think it's that as metalheads, when we see someone portraying a metalhead, we get very defensive. Yeah. And we get very, you know, that's not what we're actually like. Like, who gives this guy the right to, who gives him the right? The fucking writers. Like, the actor didn't make this. The actor didn't bust down the door and was like, I'm here to play this character you're going to write for me now. But what I loved about Eddie was he felt like someone that you knew. Like, as a metalhead, you know someone who thinks that they're this, like, that they're going to be this like crazy successful person, or like they have these big dreams. And you know people that play and love D&D. You know people that the one detail that got me was the fucking guitar pick on the necklace. Because like my dad used to make, like back in the day, he would take a guitar pick, you know, drill a little hole at the top and then put it on a necklace. And that seems so genuine to me. And I think the problem is we see that and we're like, ugh, now kids are going to want to dress like this. Come on. Back in the day when you were first discovering metal, when you were first discovering thrash, you were probably wishing that more people dressed like that so that you wouldn't feel like an outsider. Yeah. So
I still wish people dressed like that.
Yeah. Bullet belts and fucking, you know, battle vests and shit like that, like 24/7. Yeah. Why not? But I think that it comes from this place of defensiveness, of elitism, of metal gatekeeping, as we say time and time again. And if you just had fun with it and just realize that, hey, guess what? That kid who sees Eddie Munson and hears Master of Puppets is going to go, well, what else can I listen to that sounds kind of like this? And are there any modern bands that are making music like this? You know, I really love the classic stuff, but is there anyone that I can go see in concert right now that's playing this style of music, that's put out an album right now? And thankfully there are. And I think that that's really cool. I think that that's really cool. And we cannot hinge our grievances for a few cringy people on a character like Eddie Munson. Chris, what other bands? I know that we've got a few more to discuss here, but quickly, what other bands would you give to that little young budding metalhead that sees Eddie Munson and goes, I want some more modern thrash metal that I can listen to?
Let's see. We've got a few bands. I know a band that I similarly had discovered a while ago was this band Vindicator out of Ohio. And listening to their album, The Antique Witcheries from 2010, it sounded like this album could have come out in 1986. You know, nice. You know, maybe not necessarily the quality, but definitely the songwriting style. It sounded like it would have fit in right alongside, you know, Slayer and Testament and that style of music. Another band that I'd like to talk about just because their album cover is amazing is the band Holy Side. Now, on their first album, they have their album Annihilate ... Then Ask in 2017. It sounded very much, I already mentioned it, but it sounded like Gwar circa War Party 2005. That's kind of the thrash metal sound these guys had. And the album cover introduced what seems to be their mascot, who seemed to be a combination of Iron Maiden's Eddie and like the guy on the cover of so many Sodom albums with like the big muscles and a machine gun. Yeah. And he's got like a skull and a gas mask, but he's wearing like a vest and jeans and everything. So they introduced this guy on the Annihilate Then Ask album cover, Giant Guns. In 2020, they come out with the album Fist to Face. And it is this character beating up Donald Trump after having exploded through the wall that Donald Trump allegedly was going to build. And it's the most amazing fucking album cover of this fucking muscled up, gas mask wearing guy just beating the shit out of Donald Trump. The first track is called In Trump instead of like intro in Trump. And it's like audio of a guy watching Donald Trump give a speech and like insulting him. And then it goes into the song Fist to Face, which is about, I assume, punching Donald Trump in the face. And it's cool to see this band being so political and calling out shitty politics and shitty people and you know, this idea of normalizing hate. The only problem I can see with it, because it's something that I've seen in the past, is that this band is from Spain. Americans don't always like when people from other countries are calling out American politics. You know, Derek of Sum 41, who is Canadian, got a lot of shit for all of the shit he talks about United States politics. Seth Rogen, who's Canadian, gets a lot of shit for calling out American politics. So
Neil Young.
I can see people being not happy about Europeans who love to hate on the United States calling out shitty American politics, but they align with my beliefs, so I'm okay with it. So
oh boy, so it was nice being on YouTube.
But yeah, I think it goes back to, I forget which episode it was, but I seem to remember going on a rant about how if you're going to write political music, you never take the side of the oppressor.
Right.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people in Spain, people in Europe who are trying to write political thrash metal, if they see someone, no matter where they are, if they see someone who is saying hateful things or is running on a platform of keeping people from another country out of their country simply because they're different, you're going to take the side of the people being oppressed. Right. And so even though they're from another country, oppression is oppression no matter what country you're in. So it's cool to see someone calling it out. Again, there's going to be people who have a problem with it because it's a European band, but Sodom does the same shit. They're a German band, and they sing about the United States military all the time. Yeah. You know, they have an entire album about America's involvement in Vietnam. Yeah. You know, it's not anything new, but that's not going to keep people from being pissed off about it.
Yeah. We went over that in our protest metal episode.
Yeah.
Where, yeah, exactly. There was, and it's not like it's anything new. It's not, you know, suddenly, oh, this is the future that liberals want. This was always the thing. We were always writing music, you know, against the oppressor, whoever that might have been at the time, you know, and writing about the fear of what could come from these people being unchecked. So it's not anything new. It's very much a part of the DNA of thrash.
Yes.
Chris, what's another band that you would give to our listeners?
Another band that I'd really like to mention is Distillator. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It looks like it's Distillator. We'll go with Distillator. They're from the Netherlands. Lots of European bands. You know, we've talked about a lot of German bands. Gamma Bomb is from Ireland. I just talked about Holy Side from Spain. Distillator is from the Netherlands. And when I listen to them musically, it's very similar to Hexen, you know, straight ahead modern thrash. But vocally, it's very much in the style of Gamma Bomb in that it's yelled with not a lot of aggression coming through and will sometimes hit higher notes while yelling. Okay. So not like Rob Halford high notes, just like yelling at a higher pitch. Yeah. One of their albums I was listening to, Summoning the Malicious in 2017, had some really good songs. You know, Blinded by Chauvinism, Summoning the Malicious is a good one. Stature of Liberty was a good song. So it's again, there's that, probably that idea of politics infusing your thrash, that's the thing. I also really enjoyed their album from 2015, Revolutionary Cells, which has songs like Guerrilla Insurgency, Distinct or Extinct, was a really good song. And Bloody Assault was another good song. So it's, again, keeping up that aggression, keeping up that violence, those themes that we've come to know and love in thrash metal. But yeah, that was another band that I found and that I really enjoyed.
Parents groups are going to hear that clip and be like, what are they promoting? Tipper Gore is quaking.
Oh no, not again.
This keeps happening, damn it. But I love that we've given our listeners so many bands that they can go ahead and dive into, and so many modern thrash metal bands that there's no shortage of. I feel like it's just going to be happening again and again and again. Thrash as a genre has laid its claim on the music world and left such an impression that younger generations are now emulating them. And it's so important to be able to look back and pay respect to the OGs. And we have to celebrate the people who are now coming out and doing it now. The bands that are starting out, and we have to support them. If we want more of this great modern thrash or old school new wave of old school thrash or whatever the fuck you want to call it, we have to support them. So get out, buy the albums, buy fucking merch, support them by going to see them live, add them on your socials. It's like anything that you can do. That's what heavy metal is about. And especially now when it's even easier to connect with bands, you get sometimes you can have real weird parasocial relationships.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to connect with a band now on that level. So just support them whenever you can if you want to hear more of this stuff.
Absolutely. It's so important to show the support to these bands and to, like we're saying, follow them on socials and go see shows and buy their merch. And one more band that I want to make sure I mention and that we show our support for, another band out of Germany. Gee, I wonder why there's so many great thrash metal bands coming out of Germany. I'm sure it has nothing to do with Sodom and Creator. That's the band Space Chaser. I was listening to their album Give Us Life from 2021. Has songs like Remnants of Technology, The Immortals, Burn Them All. Really good thrash metal, really good music. But the thing I really want to point out is that the lead singer, Siegfried Rudzinski, at times sounds... Danke. At times, he sounds like Bruce Dickinson.
That's cool.
That's cool. Not all the time. He's mostly in a more aggressive and lower register. But as he gets to, some higher notes, at least higher for him, he sounds very much like Bruce Dickinson. And it's really cool to hear that vocal sound and that vocal style over this really intense thrash metal. And it's mixing awesome. It's mixing all the things that influenced thrash metal in the first place. Right. Slayer started because Jeff Hanneman and Kerry King wanted to play Iron Maiden songs. So to have, not the original, but at the very least the most popular and well-known Iron Maiden singer being emulated by this band Space Chaser, it's really cool to see that, and it's really cool to almost come full circle and see that what's influencing these bands are the old thrash metal bands, and yet even the bands that were influencing the old thrash metal bands are informing the decisions and the sounds of today's metal. So it's really cool to just see, not only are they inspired by those early 80s thrash metal bands, but they're inspired by the guys who inspired those bands, and that's really cool to see.
Chris, this episode was chock full of new bands for our listeners to check out, but why don't you give them one more for this week's suggestion?
Absolutely. So my suggestion for everyone to check out this week is the band Reactory and their album Collapse to Come.
Nice.
This album came out in 2020. Reactory is another German band because that's the only music I listen to anymore. This album has a lot of great thrash metal on it. Some of the standout tracks are Space Hex. Misanthropical Island is a really good one. Drone Commander, Galactic Ghosts. Really good thrash metal. But one of the things that really stood out to me about this band is the band members' stage names. You have
oh my God.
You have Johnny Master, who's the bass player. You have Jerry Reactor, who plays guitar. The Atomic Dude is the drummer. And the lead singer is Hans Hazard.
Oh, I love that. That's so fucking cool.
And since there's German, there's umlauts on everything. I fucking love it. But yeah, it is just more of the thrash metal that we've come to know and love. Something that I, weirdly enough, recently had a conversation with my brother. I'm like, you know what there's not enough of? Sci-fi and space-based thrash metal. And these guys nail it. You know, the album cover is like a fucking like Terminator on a planet, like at the very least, like the endoskeleton with like some weird grid in the sky and everything. It's very much sci-fi. You know, a song like Galactic Ghost kind of informs the theme that they're going for, but definitely some really good thrash metal. So I definitely suggest, including all of the other bands we've already discussed, I definitely want people to go out, check out Reactory and their album Collapse to Come.
I would say there was a missed opportunity there to name their drummer Atomic Clock. That would have been fucking cool. That would have been really fucking cool. So the band that I want to suggest this week is another YouTube find. I was, again, going down this rabbit hole of finding a bunch of other modern thrash metal bands from the new school of old school of cool thrash and things like that page on YouTube. And I came across a band called Riffphobia. And these guys are fucking awesome. They are so good. The album cover that I saw that grabbed my attention right away, it looks like Eddie Munson with a huge, like, hunting knife full of blood, just, like, chasing someone, and his hair is all wild and, like, blowing in the wind. And the look on this dude's face is terrifying. It's like he's just, like, this big maniacal grin. The artwork did not oversell the music because the music lived up to the hype. Their song God of Hate is fantastic. It starts out with this intro and like the drums start to kick up really hard and the guitars start coming in. I was almost expecting like the Tom Araya like the Angel of Death scream at the very beginning. These guys are so good. Their vocals definitely are more on the edge of being a little bit more growly, a little bit more not guttural, but harsher. But the rest of it, the reverb, the sound, the guitar tones are very, very reminiscent of Slayer. So just, you have to check these guys out. Their album Riffphobia has great songs. Define Infinity, Merciless is another great song, and Consume Obey are just a couple of the standout tracks that you're going to find on that album. So go out and check out the band Riffphobia off of the album Riffphobia, and just any of those fucking songs are really fucking great. All right, Chris, we did it. Episode 50 is in the books. Our first video podcast is finally part of history, and it's out there now. I'm so fucking excited. This was a lot of fun. Chris, I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Oh, absolutely. So much fun.
And also just thank you to everyone who has been tuning in since the beginning, or if you're just finding us now, or if you're just seeing this video and then you're going to head back and listen to the rest of the episodes on the podcasts available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It means a lot. And Chris and I started this show to be able to send you guys out there with new music to check out and to listen to. And we're just really happy that everyone's here and coming along for the ride. You will find our socials linked down below in the descriptions. And yeah, just, be on the lookout for more awesome metal goodness. And with that being said, thanks for tuning into the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next one.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night!